Good evening, Party going? Okay, I've been asked to talk about the contents and significance of a 430-page book which has 16 contributors in 10 minutes, maybe 15. So that's a difficult thing to do, and fortunately, the MC is not Professor Hovhannisyan, whoever has been around him in any of these conferences, he'll get there if you just add a couple of minutes to your presentation. Now, you'll have to stick with me, maybe a couple more minutes. This is the 10th volume, as we already heard, edited by Hovhannisyan on historic Armenian cities, provinces, and communities. All 10 volumes are based on papers delivered, as you know, in international conferences organized by and directed by Hovhannisyan at UCLA. Volumes were published beginning in 2001. So far, they are dedicated to one in Vaspuragan, Bagesh or Bitlis, Taron, Mush, Zop or Kharber, Karin or Erzurum, Sebastia, Lesser Armenia, Dikranager, Edessa or Urfa, the Armenian Cilicia as a whole, the Armenian Pontus, and the Trebizond and Black Sea communities. They are still waiting to be edited and published. The proceedings of the conferences on Constantinople, which was held in 2001, so it's been 10 years. Smyrna or Izmir in 2002, Caesarea in 2003, one dedicated to the 4th centennial of Norjuga, again in 2003, another on the Armenian communities of Iran, and then the Armenian Jerusalem, both in 2004, communities of the Indian Ocean, 2007, and finally the Armenian communities of the northeastern Mediterranean. So in the present volume, there are papers by 16 authors, as I told, including a handful of historians, plus 4 medievalists, 3 literary historians, 2 architectural and art historians, 1 historical geography specialist, and other researchers of modern history and human rights. So the title makes reference to 2 important cities in Armenian history. But it is in reality an introduction to the study of the entire districts of Vanant and Shirak of historic Armenia and their surroundings. Naturally, in these districts, Kars and Ani have historically been the most important and distinguished political, economic, commercial, cultural, and religious centers. After an introduction by Hovhannisyan, Robert Hewson reviews the historical geography of the region and of its neighbors through the shifting battle lines, putting into context the emergence and consolidation of the Armenian kingdoms during the 10th century and later. Tim Greenwood focuses on the formative period of the Bakraduni kingdoms through the study of the shifts of their capital cities within the context of contemporary political and commercial developments and their ability to keep for themselves more or the whole of the taxation proceeds initially intended for the Arab monarch. Professor Robert Thompson bridges these opening chapters on the history of the region with the subsequent studies on its artistic legacy, presenting 3 historians of chroniclers of Ani, Hovhannes Imastaser or Hovhannes Argavak, as we know him, Mkhidar Anetzi, and Samuel Anetzi. He attempts to find common traits among them. And it's the first time that we have 3 more or less contemporaneous historians from the same city chronicling local and national affairs. And that's already an indication of the intensity of the growth experienced in this region in many aspects that period. So then there's a partial translation and the study of the great, although unknown, mystic poet Vartan Anetzi, Vartan of Ani, by Theo van Lint of Oxford, and an analysis of his exceptional poem dedicated to the Divine Chariot. Then Christina Marangi discusses architect Dertat's building techniques and styles by comparing his cathedrals in Ani and Argina and the Church of Kakashen with his reconstruction of Hagia Sophia's monumental dome in Constantinople. There's an in-depth study of the Church of the Savior in Ani by Diane Favreau from UCLA. With the help of the Experiential Technology Center at UCLA, she oversees the digital remodeling of the church in order to explain puzzling features of this unique piece of very fine architecture. That's a new experience for us, and it's done at Diaspora. That's a nice thing. The next essays give attention to less studied periods of Ani and Kars after they ceased to be the center of Armenian political, religious, and cultural life. Claude Moutafian from France and Thomas Sinclair both demonstrate that there was still life in Ani even after the much referenced 1313 or 1319 earthquake in Ani, which would have led, we have learned, usually, to its utter and ultimate destruction and abandonment. Moutafian disputes the existence of that earthquake in the sense that it was centered in Ani as pure invention. He explores Ani's history through many genealogical observations and the intricacy of family lines and intermarriages between Muslims, Greeks, Armenians, and Georgians. Notwithstanding Armenian emigration from Ani to Cilicia, still in 1331, that was the first time. He argues that coins struck in Ani as late as the end of the 1370s, and other evidence show a living township until 1606 and even the 1630s, that's the 17th century. Sinclair, on the other hand, highlights the presence of international trade and of its significance in Kars and Ani from the 13th to the 16th century. He points out how the trade routes traversing both cities were greatly affected by the European recession of the 1330s. That's world history applied to understanding Armenian history, and we usually don't do this. Those trade routes traversing Ani and Kars were affected first by European recession, and then the simultaneous disruptions of the Italian commerce in Tabriz and the closure of the Cilician, Armenian Cilician port of Ayash in 1336 by the Mamluks, so the roads to Europe are closed. Dependent on trade, Ani's merchants emigrate to Astrakhan and Crimea to capture displaced trade routes. Even then, there is evidence of construction and restoration in Ani in 1348, or of manuscripts being copied in the same years roughly. However, intercontinental trade routes through Ani and Kars, less so for Kars, are steadily reduced to interregional and then to local trade, which leads to the de-urbanization of the plateau of Anant and Shira. With the transfer of Ani's administrative functions to Yerevan and Kars. Even when under Ottoman rule trade routes are restored, they circumvent Ani, which was just recently, even in 1578, the Sanjak capital for the Ottomans. The final punch for Ani comes in early 17th century, when Julfa Armenians, our Jubayeti, taken by Shah Abbas to Iran, absorbed completely that activity, the trade activity, along with Isfahan becoming the new port of assembly for silk caravans instead of Basra or so the Yerevan-Kars route is abandoned in early 18th century because of Iranian internal disruption, and later it becomes not only border area but war zone, and there's nobody left. The following sections of the book deal with the 19th century and later. Christopher Walker chronicles the Russo-Turkish wars around Kars and the beginning of massacres as a deliberate Ottoman policy with the slaughter of Bayezid's 2,400 Armenians in 1877. Ashot Melkonian surveys the Russian organization of the province of Kars and the demographic changes occurred in this period. Rubina Pirumian underscores the role of Kars as a launchpad for the incursion of hundreds of groups of revolutionary Armenians into Western Armenia, most of which end in actual failure and carnage, but serve to incite nationalistic ideas in the population on both sides of the border, for the senders and for receivers. Then Richard Hovhannisyan chronicles and masterfully, I'd say, narrates what he calls the contest for Gars in the region from 1914 to 21 between Armenians, Russians, and Turks, and which ends with the final loss of Gars militarily and politically. In what the son of a former British Prime Minister, Oliver Baldwin, we call a history of treachery, incompetence, and idleness. So in a way, the book comes full circle from the emergence of Gars and Ani out of inconsequential roles in history to stardom and prominence, the 9th to 11th century, to their slow decadence, and later re-emergence of Gars as an important strategic fortress, 19th century. Its recapture after the catastrophe of the genocide, its fortification, inexplicable loss, and subsequent mourning. The book can be read thus, almost as a continuing narration, which is obviously the merit of a good editor. Sometimes people grumble about editors just stamping their names on the cover of edited books. And many times they are right, but not in most cases of scholarly books, and more so in this case. I know how meticulously Professor Hovhannisyan works. It's no wonder another half a dozen volumes are still waiting in line to be edited and published. Editing a good book takes a lot of time, but I wouldn't have believed if they told me this volume took the good part of a year of work for him. But I then personally witnessed his unending process of old school perfectionism in action. Under Hovhannisyan, the book does not level up or down to the quality of its contributors. He makes all contributions rise to his parameters of excellence. And as one of my teachers, a frustrated writer turned magazine editor would repeat when I was, 13, there's a huge personal sacrifice involved in being an editor. In this case, it means that Hovhannisyan has replaced so many valuable years of archival research and the opportunity to have written even more works of his own, only to set up a framework so that others can work more easily. There is probably, however, a second and more important motivation in building this massive library, 10 books so far, on mostly disappeared Armenian cities and communities and culture and life. It reminds me of one of the greatest novelists Armenian literature has given us, Hagop Oshagan, who was also, he died in 1947. He was also the most prominent literary critic of the last century. One of his monumental works, he has many monumental works, consisted of 10 volumes, more than 500 pages each, with the general title of Panorama of Western Armenian Literature. He specifically explained that by Western Armenian literature, he wasn't talking about literature in Western Armenian language, but of the literature of Western Armenia, of which he had been a part and that had ceased to exist under his watch just a couple decades earlier. It is now that we comprehend, we realize that through those 10 volumes, he was doing much more than scholarship. He was building a memorial stele, a monument to that disappeared literature and its authors. He was mourning them. And it is by means of mourning and through that memorial that he was ensuring they exist in history, in our memory, and somehow as a foundation to our future. As in Oshagan's case, this too is the 10th volume of Hovhannisyan's series on historic Armenian cities and communities. In that sense, it also has become something way beyond the scholarly work. It has built, it has erected for us and for future generations, for Armenians and for the whole world alike, a monument and a memorial to an inspiring civilization and the beautiful culture all of us and the whole of the world has lost. Screaming genocide looks and is good and patriotic, but fixating the efforts exclusively on the legal aspects of the Armenian national laws is at best a partialistic approach. Armenians seldom or never reflect on the fact that genocide does not stop in the killing fields. It continues until its witness is killed or dies out. The last phase of genocide consists of the erasure of memory. Genocide is finished and over when fact ceases being labeled as such and become a claim you have to demonstrate and prove in perpetuity, as Mark Nishanian puts in his book, Historiographic Perversion. This is the same as to say genocide is the absence of fact due to the assassination of its factuality through the disappearance of its witness, be it people, cities, names, khachkars, or language. Without memory, without recording the presence and the forced absence of Armenian life and culture on those lands, as these books do, there is no such thing as a historical event. Why? Because after killing fathers, mothers, children, and culture, genocide kills itself. Professor Hovhannisyan's work is a great achievement in historiography, that is, in scholarship and science. But on an ethical and humanistic ground, it also constitutes a big effort to counter that last step of genocide. The legacy of Garsenani described in this volume is, therefore, in a sense, one step in the mourning process of the Armenians' loss, and at the same time, as a monument that historicizes and brings into language and memory the loss, it's a foundation for the edifice of the future. Thank you.
Պետք է խոստովանեմ, որ մինչև 5 տարի առաջ չէի մտածեր, ոչ, կմտածեի, բայց չէի համարձակել ճամփորդել Արևմտյան Հայաստան, ոչ թե որովհետև կվախնայի կամ սպառնալիքներու ենթակայի, որը ճիշտ էր, բայց այդ պատճառը չէր, այլ որովհետև չէի ուզեր տեսնել իրականությունը, չէի ուզեր տեսնել ավերակները, չէի ուզեր ապրել, ինչ որ պետք է ապրեի այդ ամայի և քանդված մայր երկրի միջոցով։ 45 տարի հայ ժողովրդի պատմությունը դասավանդեցի առանց երկրի տեսնել։ Եվ երևի այդպես կմնար, եթե այս վերջի տարիներու ընթացքին չփոխվեր, շատ բաներ չփոխվեին։ Եվ մենք ունենայինք որոշ թուրք գիտնականներ և գործընկերներ, որոնք պատրաստ էին ճանչնալու, ընդունելու անարդարությունը մինչև սևացմանություն։ Եվ 5 տարի առաջ առաջի անգամ ունալով թուրք գին պրոֆեսորի հետ ես ճամփորդեցի Բոնդոսեն, Սերծովեն, գոնե 4 նահանգներ, այսինքն Գարինը, Էրզրումը, Խարպերտը, Բիտլիսը, Երևանը, խորը ապրումներով, հատկապես իմ ծնողներուս գյուղերը, ավերակ գյուղերը դիտելով։ Իսկ երկու տարի առաջ կարծեմ Նասրի ղեկավարությամբ ճամփորդեցինք պատմական Գիլիկիան եւ այս տարի ամբողջացուցի ճամփորդելով Սամսոնեն, այսինքն Ամասիայի եւ փոքր հայկեն Սեբաստիայեն դեպի Մալաթիա եւ Խարպերտ եւ այս անգամ Տիգրանագերտ, որ եկեղեցին կկառուցվեր կամ վերակառուցվեր։ Եվ այդ ծավալ 6 մեր նահանգները, պատմական նահանգները, առավել Գիլիկյան տեսած եղած են։ This third journey, after having traveled to most of historic Armenia, but this third journey completed it in the sense that we traveled from the Black Sea at Samsun to the beautiful, beautiful Halis River at Amasya, Tokat, Sepasja, organized, as you've heard, by Armen Aroyan, and which was a Nasser historical heritage tour. And on down again to Kharpert for me the third time, and on to Maden, Chankush, where we saw the huge pit into which all the men of Chankush were taken out and murdered in the pit just a mile outside the city. And from Chankush to Diyarbakir, Dikranagir, where we witnessed the reconstruction of the Church of Surp Kiragos, with the support of the Kurdish mayor and city government. And as you probably have read, that church very recently, in the last 2 weeks, was reconsecrated. It is a famous church, Yotach Voranov, Surp Kiragos. And from there to Mardin, Catholic Armenian city of Mardin, where the Catholic primate Ignatios was murdered, but murdered after he was tortured and tormented to renounce his faith and refused to do so. And I was pleased to see in the remaining Armenian Catholic Church that his picture can now be shown. What I found thereafter is, as we went from Mardin back to Van, where we had been, and saw more places, and then over toward the northern shore of Lake Van and Argesh, or Irjes, where the earthquake was. We then entered into, for me, probably the most painful area to see on all my 3 trips. More painful than seeing my father's village of Bazmashen, where there is nothing there except a hole in the ground where Asfazazin Church used to be, where the Chiloyan clan used to be. More painful than that was to enter into an area that I knew so well from my studies, Igdir Mava, which was the old district of Surmalu in the province of Yerevan, in which Mount Ararat is located. To go through Gulp or Gohp, which were rich in their salt mines, and across the Arax River into Kars and Ani. Why was this more difficult? Probably you can guess. Because this was not lost or occupied by the Ottomans in the 16th century like Van and like Kharpert and like many other areas. This area was Armenian until 1920. This area was a part of the first Armenian Republic until the end of 1920. This area, rich in raw materials, in resources, in pasture lands, in wheat lands, twice the size probably of the current Republic of Armenia, was a part of our first republic. And that was what was so painful for me, to see mile after mile, kilometer after kilometer of green pastures, of cattle, of horses, of richness, of green everywhere. And then through Sarıkamış forests, where the great pine forests that give timber and lumber All of that was ours within the First Republic, and all of it was lost, as Mr. Bulujan pointed out, in an inexplicable and irreversible, probably, loss at the end of 1920, after Mustafa Kemal had gotten assurances from Moscow that the Red Army would not intervene if he took action against the Republic of Armenia. Եվ իրոք ցավալի ապրումներին ինձի համար կոնե ամենա ցավոտ եւ միաժամանակ կսկանչանային դեսնելով Խարզի Պերտը մայրի գեղեցի, դեսնելով հավիարգա եւ անզուգական անին, որ այս տարի շաբաթ կմեկնում Երևան, որ պիտի նշվի անի իբր մայրաքաղաքի 1050 ամյակ։ So it was a very moving time, and I was pleased that we had a group of individuals, some right here in this auditorium, some from the East Coast, everyone different, all searching for something, all searching. And I think that anyone who goes is going to be searching for something. We were very fortunate that we had with us one of our own here in Glendale, Ruben Berberian, whose photographic skill and knowledge and detail preserved for us a fortune of pictures and illustrations which neither my camera nor anyone else's camera could have captured. And rather than my trying to do the journey today, I've asked Ruben to do the showing with his slides, with his pictures of our journey and his commentary, and I'm going to stand here and chime in if I feel the need to chime in. And so let's give Ruben applause for what he mentioned.
So as he mentioned, this was the route of the first trip, and this was the route of the second trip. We're only going to concentrate on the black circle because it's the Kars-Ani area, because otherwise there's 3,000 pictures, and I don't know if you have the patience to go through them. These are the list of the cities and villages that we went through on the first trip and the second trip. And again, the black circle is the 2 days of the trip that we're going to highlight here today. You cannot ignore earthquakes when you talk about this region. As you know, on October 23rd, the day after Suk Giragos Church in Tikanakert was reconsecrated, there was an earthquake centering on Van and Ersis, or Arges in Armenian. And this area, throughout the ages, was impacted by earthquakes. They discovered a crack on the Dome of Holy Cross on Akhtamar Island in Lake Van, unfortunately with this latest earthquake, and I just heard from Nubar Aroyan that Baragabank and Van also got damaged. We're also going to talk about earthquake damage in Tikor, and the Ani Cathedral had major damage in 1319. So this earthquake situation has been around for a long time. There's really two periods of time that are important when you think about this region. One is 1000 AD, which was the height of the Bakratuni kingdom, or kingdoms, because there was a kingdom of Lori, kingdom of Kars, principality of Taik, principality of Taron, the separate kingdom of Artsruni kingdom of Aspuraga, and Sunik. The other period, which is what Richard Hovhannissian just talked about, was the painful thought of, in periods in 1919-1920, Kars, Ani, Otli, Igdir were part of Armenia, and unfortunately we lost them. This unfortunately is not in high definition, but the day of our departure from Van, this is a picture of Mount Sipan from our hotel room. And this is the last view of Mount Sipan on the northeast corner of Lake Van, which is very close to Ursus, where the major earthquake just happened. When you go up the freeway, Armen Aroyan is so great. You know, he's been doing this for 20 years. He does 2 to 6 trips every year. And, you know, he stopped in the middle of the freeway, and we were wondering why. And then he said, look over there. And you see a camouflaged Armenian church, and I'm using a zoom here, so you hardly see it from the street. But that's probably why it's still around, because you could hardly see it. So this is Suk Stepanos. Then there's Muratye, which is a waterfall northeast of Lake Van. The Armenian word is Perkri. And you can see the people at the bottom right-hand corner enjoying the waterfall. People come here for wedding pictures. They come here for picnics. This is Huri Aroyan, who is part of our group, the middle lady there. And she's standing with an Armenian shopkeeper who has a shop in Perkri. He's Turkish-speaking, but he claimed to be Armenian, and those are his children. This is the bridge, which I'm pretty sure Richard is going to remember, because it really rocked a lot. And I put a circle around the girl who's on her hands and knees, if you can see that. And this is how you get from the parking lot to the waterfall. And this is Batatir Hovanesian dancing with the locals in a shaded area at the park. And surprisingly, we met another Armenian couple from the Netherlands, originally from Armenia, at Perkri as well. So we did meet quite a lot of Armenians. Next on our trip, we stopped at Calderon, and there's a monument there to commemorate the Ottomans defeating the Safavid Empire of Iran in 1514. This is an image that Roy Martinian gave me, my cousin. The reason I put it in here is I want you to get the perspective of the pictures of Mount Ararat and Masi Sensis that we're going to see from the Turkish side. From the Armenian side, you almost always see both mountains together, but at least on our trip, we saw the mountains separately. Again, this isn't high definition, but you see a little Masis here from a little bit outside of Dogo Bayazit. And this is the members of our group, and several of the people are here. Nubar and Huri Aroyan, Armen Aroyan, Richard Hovanesian. We also have Bahe Hagopian, who I saw in the audience. We encountered a little bit of rain, so it wasn't the clearest picture of Mount Ararat, but it was special nonetheless. And this is my self-portrait. I took my picture out, just so that you can see the valley just in front of Mount Ararat. Richard just mentioned the significance of Igdir and the fact that Drog Kanayan, the first defense minister of Armenia and the commander at the battle at Bash Abaran and the Battle of Georgia, was from Igdir. And so was Avadis Aharonyan, who signed the Treaty of Sèvres on behalf of the Armenian government. Igdir is really a Russian outpost type of town, and the architecture is very Russian. And there's these single-story buildings that you see there. But the Armenian presence is still felt, because if you look closely on the buildings, you will see Armenian lettering. Next, we'll talk about Tikor, which has a basilica called the Church of Saint Sarkis. And I have two pictures here from the internet. One is from an engraving from the 1840s, and the other one is a picture of the church just before the 1912 earthquake. This church dates from the 480s, so it's a very old church, and it was founded by the Kamsarakan family. I'll talk more about them in a little while. This was apparently the earliest known domed Armenian church, and there's lettering which unusually ran from bottom to top. Here's the sad part of our trip. This is what's left of the Tikor Basilica now, and you saw it in 1912, so it was, you know, not in great shape, but it looked like something, and this is what's left of it now. And they actually put farm equipment in it. I don't know why, because there's no roof, but it's a nice storage area for their farm equipment.
If I could add that in the period of the Republic, a very famous archaeologist, architect, Toromanyan, you probably have heard the name Toromanyan, and others went on expeditions here to record all these things, to gather all this information, artifacts, and to put them into a national museum here. But again, it was lost in 1920 and that work was interrupted.
Now we enter Kars, and again, this is a picture from the internet, and you can see the citadel off to the right-hand side, just to get a perspective of the size. This is the Kars Friendship statue. Prior to the dismantling, as you remember, the Turkish politician said that this was a terrible statue, and they decided to tear it down. The mayor of Kars, who sponsored this project, ended up losing a subsequent election, and the statue was never finished. And you were supposed to see the extending of the hand of friendship on the statue, but the hand remained on the ground. By the time we got there, only the legs remained on the statue because it was dismantled this year. And the hand was still there on the ground, but further, not even standing up, just lying down. This is the Kars Citadel, and I love this picture because you see the Kars River going around it, so you see the actual fortifications halfway up, and there was walls that have been demolished. But the actual citadel itself is in pretty good shape. And here it is, a closer view. And apparently there are Armenian inscriptions on it, but we ran out of time, so we didn't actually go into the citadel. Here's another view from below.
And in Russian times, there were 30 different forts leading up to the main fort. I mean, 30 of them, all connected. It was Anarik. No one would think that anyone could capture this great fortress.
From the friendship statue, this is an overview of Kars, and you can see the Cathedral of Sub-Arakelots, or Holy Apostles, that was built in the 10th century. There also are mosques on either side of it. Here's a close-up. And here it is again from the ground level. And this is a nice shot because you actually see the Kars Citadel in the background. And you see Batatir right in the front there, so you get an idea of how big the church is. Batatir, sorry. It's called Holy Apostles because there's 12 apostles on the dome. And here's a picture of the 12 apostles, and I got one actual one on the left-hand side. And I also want to note that they repaired the door. We weren't allowed to go inside, but there's a brand new door on it. And this is the sign that appears outside of the church. And it mentions the Bakratid King Abbas, but not that he was Armenian. And it also mentions that it was converted into a mosque in 1064 AD when the Seljuks conquered Kars. And it was used again as a church for 40 years in 1878 when the Russians took back that area. It wasn't used for a period of time after that, Then it was used as a museum between 1969 to 1980. And then it reopened as a Kumbet mosque in 1994. The only mosque that I'm aware of with 12 apostles on the dome. Here's a close-up of one of the apostles with a fish. And here's two more. And this is where they're situated on the dome. This is a postal card that I found with Russian and French on it. And it shows the freestanding bell tower that used to be right beside the church. But apparently that was demolished in 1960. This is a Turkish stamp that was issued in 1964 to commemorate the 900th anniversary of the conquest of Kars. And it shows the church and the fort. And also the other stamp has Arbaslan, who was the conqueror of Kars. This is the Sharens house. Sharens was a poet from Kars. And there's a Soviet stamp from 1958 with his picture on it. You know, everybody loves the internet, but you always wonder if what you read is correct. This is an article that I saw that a group of Armenians traveled to Western Armenia and wanted to purchase the Sharens house. And you can see the black and white is the same as the color picture that I took, but they were disappointed when the owner demanded 2 million euros for that building. Doesn't look like it's worth 2 million euros to me, but you know, location, I guess. And this is a 1997 Armenian Republic stamp of Sharens. This is a street scene, and I won't butcher her name again, but she's standing there. And
Try it.
Batiter. Kars is a very muddy, there's a lot of dirt on the ground, there's snow in the winter, and it's kind of modern, but it's still kind of in the past. So here you have a horse-drawn carriage with rubber wheels as an improvement over wooden wheels. And unlike LA, there's actually a gutter system, so it does have some advantages. This is a local who's preparing bedspreads with animal hair. Richard hates me showing this picture, but I had to. This was a military base named after General Karabakir, who was the general who fought the Armenians in Kars in 1920. And it's not a good idea to take pictures of military bases, but I got away with it this time. Here's another item that Richard is not too crazy about. On the road from Kars to Ani, there's a monument for the 570 Turkish villagers killed by Armenians.
Wow.
The one good thing is this sign is reflective and it's very difficult to read. But just to give you an idea of what it says, first of all, it happened on April 24th, 1918. And it says things like, poured kerosene and set them to fire, cleave the abdomens of our pregnant women, stick the bayonets into unborn babies. So it's not very complimentary. This is the village right outside of Ani. This is a timeline of the key dates that impact Ani. Like I mentioned, the Kamsarakan family, which was a noble family, an offshoot of one of the 7 great houses of Parthia. They were of Persian Arasid origin. And the Pahlavuni was an offshoot of the Kamarsakans. So they were there first, and they built the Tikor Basilica that I mentioned before. And the Bakradids came later, and they bought some estates from the Kamarsakans. It kind of started in 804 when Ashok the Meat Eater was given the title of Prince of Armenia by the Arabs. And in 961 AD, the capital became a kingdom at that time. King Ashok transferred the capital from Kars to Ani, and Richard mentioned he's going to go because they're celebrating the 1050th anniversary of Ani becoming the capital of Armenia. So under King Sampat and King Agip, Ani grew stronger, and then the Armenian Catholicos that moved there to Ani in 992. In 1000, the population of Ani is said to have been 100,000, and it doesn't sound like much, but when you consider that the city of London at that time had a population of less than 20,000, according to Wikipedia, you get an idea of it was a big deal. Ani was a big deal at that time. When Hovhannes Simpat died in 1041, the successor to Basil, the Byzantine Emperor Michael IV, claimed Ani. And then here's a couple of important dates. We already mentioned some. In 1045, Ani surrendered to the Byzantines, and it didn't last in Byzantine hands for very long because the Seljuk Turks arrived in 1064. In 1199, the forces of the Georgian Queen Tamar captured Ani and dislodged the Shadadids. However, the governorship of Ani was given to the Armenian general Zakharid. In 1236, the Mongols captured and sacked the city. In the 14th century, the city was ruled by a succession of local Turkish dynasties, including the Black Sheep clan. In the 1280s, Tamerlan captured Ani, and in 1579, the Ottoman Empire took control from the Persian Safavids. By the middle of the 18th century, the site was entirely abandoned. This is a Turkish coin issued in 1971, and it's about Arslan. He captured Ani in 1064, but his more important feat was defeating the Byzantines in 1071 at the Battle of Manzikert. And by winning this battle, it opened up the entire area, as this coin illustrates. So that dot where those lines are emanating from is where Manzikert exists. This was a big deal. This is something more modern before we get to the pictures. Ani is looking for inclusion on the UNESCO World Heritage List. So the Turks have undergone a couple of restorations. The first thing that they restored was the mosque, the miniature mosque that was built in 1072. But they did also renovate the Tigran Honets Church and the walls around Ani. And this guy, the Turk Dogane, said that nearly 23,000 people visited Ani within 6 months, primarily from France, Japan, and Britain. And this article was August 15, 2011. I borrowed this map from the Virtual Ani website, which is a great website, and you see how Ani is situated. On the east and west sides, there are ravines that provide for natural fortifications that are beefed up by some walls as well. On the bottom side, that swervy thing is the Ahorian River, and it's not just a river. There's a steep incline right coming up from the river that you'll see later. So 3 sides of Ani had natural fortifications. The northern area did not have natural fortifications, and that's where the highest walls are located. Here are the outer northern walls, and they're double-lined. I'll explain that later on a better slide coming up. There are 3 gates in the northern wall: the Lion's Gate, the Car's Gate, and the Divin Gate. And here's just a few more slides to give you an impression of what the walls are like. So, many people say that Armenia is full of churches, why didn't we build forts? Well, in Ani, you still see the walled fort. Here's the entrance. In the walls, there's crosses, and here there's the coat of arms of Ani, which is a lion. And again, you see the outer northern walls, and unfortunately, this doesn't allow me to point out the security fence that was built in 2002 at the bottom there. I have better shots of it coming up. Here is a portion of one of the towers, which is part of the wall, and I blew up the picture of a cross that you see from the outside. It's been pretty controversial, the restoration work that the Turks have undertaken. Some people want them to do the restorations, and others don't want them to touch it. Here you see the results. You could clearly see what's new and what is more dated. Here's a good example of the double line of walls on the northern side. So if the enemy breached the first wall, they would have to contend with the second wall. And these walls were initially built by King Simput in 989. Here's the entrance to Ani. It is a magical place. And when we were there, again, unfortunately, the projector's not on high def, but the greens, it's almost like you were in Ireland. There was like many shades of green that you could see. This is an overview of Ani. If you were looking from the Armenian side, this is what you would see. So on the leftmost side, there's caves underground in Ani. Then you have King Agik's Church of the St. Gregory. And I'm going to have additional slides on each one of these buildings coming up. The Church of St. Gregory of the Abu Hamarens, I can't pronounce that. City walls at the north. The Mosque of Minachir, the Cathedral of Ani, and the Church of the Holy Redeemer. I have about 5 more slides of the walls from the inside view. This gives you an idea of how long the wall is and how big Ani is from the inside. This is a portion of the eastern walls, and here you see the security fence pretty clearly, put there in 2002, and apparently when they were putting it, they shake the ground and cause some additional damage as well. And you see some caves on this side too. I believe this is the last picture of the walls from the inside. When you're in Ani, it's a very eerie feeling. It's so big that at times I got away from the rest of the group, and you're like, you could be totally alone in Ani, and you just see the mountains, and it's an incredible feeling. This is the same site looking in a different direction, where you see the local village that is right beside the city. And apparently they used some of the stones from Ani for their construction, although we didn't actually go there. This is, again, from the Virtual Ani website. It's a model showing what the dome looked like on the Cathedral of Ani before it fell in 1319. This is a 2002 stamp commemorating the architect Turdat and the Cathedral of Ani, which was over 1,000 years at that point. And again, you see the dome that in the drawings of the way it used to be. Richard mentioned he's going to go for the 1050th anniversary of the foundation of Ani as the capital. Here's a gold coin in antique gold that the Republic of Armenia issued, and you can see the lion coat of arms on one of the coins in the Ani Cathedral on the back side of the coin. So here is the Ani Cathedral. It is huge. It's also known as Supa Svazadzin, Church of the Holy Mother of God, or the Holy Virgin Mary. And not too many Armenians may realize that it's also called the Fitye Mosque, and more on that later. It started construction in 989 by King Simput, and it was finished in 1001. Designed by Turdat, the most celebrated architect of medieval Armenia. And he's also famous for having repaired the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. The domed basilica collapsed in 1319 due to earthquake. Here's another shot. And again, the Turks have been doing some renovation and shoring up the walls. And here you see a metal post holding up the wall. Here's the Mosque of the Minachir, the Cathedral of Ani, and the Super Beach Church. So you see how they're situated between themselves. And here's just the two churches. And again, too bad this isn't in high def, but the shades of green, the mountain in the background, the rocks at the forefront, it's a pretty incredible picture.
And imagine this being filled with buildings throughout.
Yeah, only the churches and the mosques remain. All the other buildings apparently are gone. This is the south side of the Cathedral of Ani, and here you have some people standing in front of it, so you get an idea of the size. We just had some rain today, and you look at this roof and you just shudder at the damage that's going to happen. There's grass growing on it. Here's a close-up shot so you get an idea of the carvings that are on the church. Here's the west side of the church, and again you see the metal post holding it up, and you see the cracks everywhere on the church. This is another group shot that was on the pamphlet, I believe, announcing the event. Here on this side, there's a hole so you could look right into the church. And here's a better view of the hole. This is the north side of the church. And here's the final east side of the church. And here it is in relationship to the Mosque in miniature. And again, you'll have to come to my house and see this on a plasma, because the colors and the mountains and everything is pretty incredible. This is the inside. The interior has pointed arches and clustered piers that give it the appearance of Gothic architecture. However, that's a style which Ani Cathedral predates by several centuries. So there's been a lot of studies that have been conducted hypothesizing that perhaps the Ani Cathedral was the inspiration for Gothic architecture in Europe. Here's two pictures side by side, and just notice how tall the inside is. There's some people so that you can get an idea. There's Richard at the bottom of that one. Around, I have a circle around it, and again you can see how tall the church is. Notice the metal post, even on the inside, to the right of the picture. Also, in the prior picture, you see the metal post right beside Richard, on both sides actually. So it is in danger of falling, and one shudders to think if there was some earthquake damage on October 23rd here as well. Here's another idea.
They did this 1,000 years ago.
Yeah. Here's another picture on the inside with the metal post holding it up. And here's another group picture on the inside. We tried to sing in Akhtamar, and they wouldn't let us sing inside that church, but in some of the other former churches, we were successful in singing Sharadans. Here's a picture that might disturb some of you. In 1064, Alp Arslan conquered Ani. He removed the cross off of Ani, and he prayed there. The Seljuk Turks renamed Ani Cathedral the Fethiye, or Victory Mosque, in 1124. On October 1st, 2010, an opposition party leader rallied hundreds of supporters for a Friday prayer less than 2 weeks after the Christian liturgy that occurred at Akhtamar on September 19, 2010. So this is in the middle of no place, and they paid to bring all these people there. So this is a big deal for the Turks to spend that much money to do this right after the Christian liturgy at Akhtamar. Here's the Church of the Holy Redeemer. Again, the colors are brilliant if you see this in high def. And there's flowers everywhere. Here is half of the church gone on one side and the other side. And then you see the other side completely open. And here's some information on the church. It was built in 1035 by the Pahlavuni family. It's a unique design, 19-sided externally, there's 8 apses internally, with a huge central dome set up on a 12th drum. It was built by Prince Pahlavid to house a fragment of the true cross. The church was largely intact until 1955, but then the entire eastern half collapsed during the storm. Here's a close-up. Here's a close-up on the side that still is there, and you can see the cracks. It's just a matter of time. And here you see metal posts holding up what's remaining on the bottom. Here's some Armenian lettering on the church. Here's a wildflower in Ani. These are gold and silver coins issued by the Republic of Armenia in 1998 to commemorate Ani and the 1700th anniversary of Christianity in Armenia. And the church on these coins is this one, the Church of St. Gregory of the Abu Hamarans, late 10th century, built as a private chapel, again for another Pahlavoni family member. You really don't appreciate the size of this church until a few slides from now when I have some people in front of it. Here you see the church with the northern walls in the background. Here, there's a circle on the left bottom side. There's 3 people standing there. So you could appreciate how big the church is and how big the walls on the northern side are. And then you also see the mountains in the background. Again, you got to see this in high def because there's all kinds of shades of green there. Again, I'm a roof freak, especially after a day of rain, but the roof doesn't look too good. There's grass growing there. Here's the bottom part. And there's also Armenian lettering on the front door. This is the inside of the church, so it's not as bad as I thought it would be based on the roof. And there is graffiti on the walls inside. This is a good shot because you see the natural fortifications that Ani had. This is a ravine, a pretty steep one, and then there's caves on either side, and then there's remnants of walls that added additional fortification to the location. Here is a distant shot of that same church we were looking at, and you get a better idea of the defenses of Ani, which were primarily natural on the eastern and western sides. And all of those hills contain caves in them. So I have a couple of multiple shots here of the same thing, just so you appreciate it better, see it from different angles. And you also see the security fence that was added in 2002. You also see the King Agit's Church of the St. Gregory there, the walls on the northern side of the church. And another shot of the security fence. Now we're going to focus on the caves with another security fence blocking access. And here is a close-up of the caves. On the opposite side, there are literally more caves. And it used to act as urban sprawl. Whenever Ani overgrew population-wise, people would come and live in the caves. And apparently there's frescoes on the walls and the ceilings. Unfortunately, we didn't have time, and I think it's blocked off. Here's some additional caves. So they refer to underground Ani because there's a whole network of caves literally underneath. This is side 1 of the miniature mosque. Side 2. And I like this shot. It's side 3, and you also see the citadel of Ani. Ani also has a citadel on top of that hill. The mosque was named after a miniature, the first member of the Shahabid dynasty that ruled Ani after 1072. Here's a close-up, and here's the citadel. The citadel is considered the inner fortress. And there's apparently 3 churches. I got 3/4 of the way up, and then I start to run out of time. Apparently the churches inside, including the Church of the Palace, collapsed in the 1966 earthquake. In 1921, the Armenian Republic issued this stamp, and that's the Citadel Church that is depicted on the stamp. Again, I wish you could see this in high definition, because this is the Ahurian River, and you have Armenia on the left side, and you have Turkey on the right side. When I said that the river acted as natural fortifications, I think this picture illustrates that it's not just the river, it's the incline that you have to climb to get to the city as well. I also have a white circle, if you see that on the right-hand side. And here it is zoomed. This is the Church of Kiskali. The Turkish name means maiden castle, and it also has Armenian name, Kusanats, or Kusamros, Virgin's Castle. And I blew up the picture to the left. Just as before I was looking towards the south on the Ahurian River, I literally just turned around. Now I'm looking at the northeast side. And we're going to concentrate on three things: the bridge that crosses the Ahurian, the monastery of the Hypsinian Virgins, and the quarry that's being built on the Armenian side. Here's a close-up. You could literally throw a rock and you would hit Armenia, but it's totally inaccessible. There, you see the security fence that the Turks built in 2002, and on the Armenian side there's guard towers. It's not easy to get that close to the river. Here's the monastery of the Hypsinian Virgins. Again, you see the security fence that they just added in 2002. Now some Armenian controversy. This is the quarry on the Armenian side with a guard post as well. This quarry was built in 1999 to extract stone from the vicinity of Ani to build the new cathedral in Yerevan to mark the 1700th anniversary of Armenia's conversion to Christianity. The quarry remained open after the cathedral was finished, and it grows bigger each year. There has been obvious environmental damage to the landscape, noise pollution from the constant sound of heavy machinery, and explosions within the quarry caused the fragile buildings at Ani to literally shake. Now we see another church, and this one is different than the others, because this is built in 1215, during the Georgian period, when Armenia was governed by the Zakharites, the Armenian Zakharites. It was commissioned by an Armenian merchant, Tigran Honens, and it has some pretty nice frescoes on the inside. This is one of the better preserved buildings in Ani, and some of the frescoes are believed to have been drawn by Georgian artists, because they also include some Georgian scenes from the life of Saint Nino and the conversion of the Georgians to Christianity. But there's also Armenian frescoes inside too. This is the church, and that indentation is the Ahurian River. You don't see the bottom because there's the cliffs. So we're looking towards Armenia here. And this picture is looking from the Armenian side towards Turkey. I'm in Turkey, but you're looking from Armenia is on your back. This is a close-up of the dome, just so that you see that there's intricate carvings, including the circle of life, some birds, etc. These are the frescoes on the inside, and it's in pretty good shape compared to the other buildings. Wrong way. Here there's Armenian lettering on this one. Now we've left Ani, and we're at the place about 15 kilometers north of Ani that's called Garmir Vank, or Red Church. This is literally in the middle of no place. We were going, we had no idea this is where we were headed, but we finally arrived, and from the distance, the church totally dominates the village. This is another group picture. And here's some Armenian lettering on the church. This is one of the pictures that I think Richard felt really sad to see, because you see geese at the very bottom there. Again, you have to see this in high definition. There's the river, there's some cows, there's horses. And then you see the landscape. It's like really good pasture land. And there's a lot of, dairy producing capability in this part of Kars Ani region. Now we're leaving Kars on the way to Erzurum, and we're 10 kilometers southwest of Kars. And this is the remains of another church that was apparently left in ruins by the 1830s. These are the forests that Richard was referring to. Just imagine what a boost this would have been to the Republic to have the dairies of Kars Ani region and the forests of Sarakamish to help the Republic get on its feet. Sarakamish is famous for something else. There was a battle there in December 22nd, 1914 to January 17, 1915. It was the Russian Empire versus the Ottoman Empire. And this was part of the Caucasus campaign, and it ended up in Russian victory. The Ottoman strategy demanded that their troops be highly mobile and to arrive at specified objectives at precise times. The Ottoman troops were ill-prepared for winter conditions, and they suffered major casualties of 60,000 dead out of an army of 90,000. Enver Pasha led the Third Army troops, and many point to this event as a turning point because the Turks realized that there was Armenians fighting on the Russian side. And then they started to doubt the loyalty of the Armenian troops on the Turkish side. There's a huge hotel at Sarakamish. It's a winter resort. You could go skiing there. And to our amazement, there's the Iranian, Armenian, Azeri, and Georgian flags outside. Also, when we stayed in Kars, we stayed at the Grand Ani Hotel, and the Armenian flag was flying there too. However, there was a Karabakh hotel where there was an Azeri flag, but no Armenian flag. And there are quite a lot of Azeris in the region. These are more cows and mountains. We're on the road from Kars to Erzurum. And here's one last picture that, again, I wish you could see in high definition because the shades of green and yellow are exceptional. And that brings the presentation to a close. The land is beautiful, and it's waiting for the next chapter of history.
Thank you very much.